right, hello again, and today we are going to be talking about medical records and money. How to document motorcycle injuries the right way. Welcome to a new informative segment of Moto Talks with Mitch and Mel for the law firm of Proner. I'm your host and fellow writer Mel Maguia. And as often as we can, we're going to sit down with a personal injury expert himself and writer, Mr. Mitch Proner, a personal injury attorney with over 30 years of experience, here to answer questions or any interesting topics that you might find useful in the personal injury world. And please remember, folks, if you need to contact us, all consultations are free and confidential. You can call us at any time at 1-800-321-1234. Now, before we go on, I want to do a quick plug that if you want to meet us here in person here in New York City, we're actually going to have a booth this Saturday, September 20th, for the Indian Larry's block party. It's a pretty big deal. So if you get a chance, come on by and say hi. And, we might have some nice giveaways for you. And it'll be nice to just talk to you in person. And don't feel pressured that you have to have a motorcycle. If you don't, no problem. We'll be more than happy to talk to you. And actually, here's a little, show a little flyer. If we can, is that going to pop up over here? Any flyers? All right, that was basically we got the chance to do an event a couple of weeks ago, a ride to fight suicide. That was a really amazing event. So yeah, we're definitely getting more involved in the community. All right, with that, let's how you doing, Mitch?
Well, I'm doing well. So you say you said an attorney for over 30 years. So yeah, so here I'll give you some dates. My father first started this law firm in 1958. He was a rider. I remember when I was a kid hearing in my backyard my father starting up the bike, and I thought it was so loud. And then he took me on the back when I was a kid. When I started riding mini bikes and dirt bikes, when I guess in the early 70s, I got my first real motorcycle, a Yamaha DOHC. It was a 1978, and I purchased it used in 1983. That was the first time I had a licensed street bike. I've had motorcycles ever since. Since 1988, they've always been Harleys. 1988 is also when I got my law license. And with my brand new law license, I got myself a Harley, and I've had bikes ever since. Always. And I rode last weekend. Last weekend I rode over 400 miles on my road glide. I went from Bridgehampton, New York, to North Haven, Connecticut, and back. And it was a whole day. It was great. And I'm riding this weekend. So riding's a part of my life. And law, obviously, I've been trying cases for a long time. I've tried cases in over 30 different jurisdictions. I think I've tried more motorcycle accident cases than any other attorney in the United States. I really tried a lot of these cases, and I've been successful. And I've lectured about trying motorcycle accident cases from Canada to across the United States to attorney groups for continuing legal education for attorneys. I teach other lawyers how to do this. I think over 20 years ago, the New York State Trial Lawyers Institute first sold a videotape of me giving a program on how to try a motorcycle accident case. And attorneys often ask me how to do it. Now, that being said, today's topic is medical records and motorcycle injury claims. And on that topic, first off, I'd say, without medical records, you don't have an injury claim. It's that simple. You need a doctor, as a matter of law, to tie your injuries into the incident. Now, I suppose if all you sustained was some road rash and you never went to a doctor, you could probably establish that with photos.
Okay.
But typically, you need medical records. especially if you're going to prove a permanent injury. Except for, of course, going back to the road rash example, maybe you could tie your scarring into an incident. But I don't think that there's been a motorcycle injury claim settled for significant money without doctors. And it's important. More important than the money you're going to get from a claim is for your health. Your health is more important than any money you're going to get from a claim. And anybody that thinks otherwise is a fool. Because money somebody can have one day and not have it the next, but your health is forever. So the most important thing after a claim is to get attention as soon as possible. Now, some people say, and I've heard it 1,000 times, oh, I didn't want to go to the hospital because I didn't want to leave my bike.
Yeah.
I wanted to stay with my bike. I didn't want them just to go off in a tow truck and me not knowing what happened. That's my bike. No. You could always get another bike. I don't care how much you love that bike, you could always get another bike. And even old bikes that you have for a long time, eventually people get rid of them. I had a 93 Heritage Softail that I put over 120,000 miles on. Eventually I got rid of it. I got rid of it because it was constantly leaking into my garage, and my wife put her foot down because the leaking fluids can make a mess and smell pretty bad. But that's the truth. Of course, there are people that have bikes for, antique bikes that are 50 years old or more, but that's a rarity, and they don't typically ride them very often. So if your bike is down and you've got a choice between your health and the bike, let the bike go. If you're that concerned about the damage to your bike, get collision coverage, and you can replace the bike.
Right. So, in terms of yeah, definitely. Oh, and then also what you were mentioning before, especially if it's an older bike, what is the underinsured insurance is also, I know it's getting a little off topic.
Okay,
it's a good idea to have too.
I'll get into that. So property damage typically covered under collision. And if you have special parts on the bike, you should send those receipts to your carrier to make sure that they're part of your collision coverage. But beyond that, you have liability coverage, which covers if you injure somebody else, like if a passenger on your bike gets injured and they sue you, your liability will cover that. Then you have underinsured coverage if the other vehicle that hit you doesn't have the limits you have, and uninsured if they don't have insurance at all. And you should purchase as much insurance as you could afford for underinsured and underinsured, because a lot of times there's other vehicles that aren't carrying much coverage and you might get badly injured, and you should get the higher limits. And typically the higher limits don't cost that much more than the lower limits because they typically don't go into the higher limits on claims. But let's stay back with medical records. So
yeah, definitely.
First place you're going to acquire the medical records is the ambulance. And you should tell the ambulance drivers everything that's bothering you, not just your main concern. Because it could be that your main concern is a cut on your shin, but that they stitch up and it's better in 10 days, but your neck is bothering you for years. But you never mention the neck at all. So when you get that ambulance, tell them everything that bothers you. Same thing when you go to the emergency room. Document all your injuries. Not just so that they look at them, maybe take some x-rays, but additionally, it'll document them for the claim. So the ambulance and the emergency room, tell them everything that's bothering you, not just your main concerns. Secondly, some conditions you might not be aware of, but they could be really important for your future. I unfortunately had represented the estate of an individual where he called to his wife and he says, I hurt my leg. I should be fine, but I'm going to be late. So just put the food aside. You'll heat it up later. He died. He didn't even realize he hit his head. Or if he did, he didn't tell the... It wasn't in the emergency room, but it was on... I'm sorry. It wasn't in the ambulance, but finally in the emergency room, he started to say he had a headache. He had a bleed on his brain. and not getting the immediate attention maybe was the difference between him coming home for dinner or his family going to a funeral. So you got to give all your complaints.
All right.
It's important. Also, don't think every time you hit your head you die. I've had clients that have had really bad head injuries where they had to do a craniotomy, where they removed part of your skull to relieve the pressure, and they were fine afterwards. They went back to work and everything else. Sometimes people make good recovery, sometimes they don't do as well. But you're more safe reporting all your injuries at the earliest possible instant. And those records are what establish your claim. After that, you can't establish permanency of your conditions if you don't follow up and get the follow-up medical care. Typically, once you leave the emergency room, they'll give you instructions. Follow up with your own doctor. They might not even say it to you. It might just be on a little piece of paper that they give you that are your discharge papers. Typically, you'll get a 5 or 6 page document when you leave, and in there it says, if you have any ongoing concern, you got to get a doctor to document your ongoing concerns. Those doctors that document your ongoing concerns will do things that can help you. Number one, they can prescribe physical therapy if you need it. Number two, they can give you medicine that might make you feel better. Number three, they can monitor your condition and see if you need a possible surgery that can improve your health. You don't have to get the surgery just because a doctor recommends it. But if a doctor's considering it, you should consider it too, because it might improve your quality of life. And lastly, all these records will be useful to the attorney in presenting your claim to get you the money that you deserve for any ongoing complaints, because you can't establish permanency without a doctor. And you need a doctor to establish that there is permanency and that they were causally related to the incident, meaning they come from the motor vehicle crash.
So I'll basically, essentially, any of these, like, I guess, specialists, or like even if they do like MRIs or EMGs, all of that stuff definitely helps strengthen your case, so to speak, and it also benefits your health too.
So MRIs, you brought up another topic. Doctors can do two things. They can listen to your complaints, and those are subjective findings. They can take x-rays and MRIs and do testing. Those are objective findings. Why? Subjective. The subject says they have these conditions. My head hurts. My knee hurts. My back hurts. Is it true? I don't know. I just said those things. It's not true. I feel fine. There's a fracture on this x-ray. That's an objective finding. You can't fake an objective finding. Now, that doesn't mean subjective findings aren't important. A doctor can't diagnose a heart attack without subjective findings. So the subjective findings are important. They'll help the doctor make a diagnosis. But objective findings verify.
Okay.
And then the doctor gives you a diagnosis and a prognosis. A prognosis is what are the long-term effects of this condition. So in order to get compensation, you need a diagnosis, a prognosis, and it has to be causally related. And that all comes from a doctor with his medical records.
So what if there's obviously you can't go to the doctor all the time. What if there's a gap in treatment? I mean, can that hurt your claim as a writer?
So the law actually recognizes that at times a gap in treatment can affect your claim. So on motor vehicle accidents that are not motorcycle accidents, you have to prove a serious injury to get compensation. That's under New York's no-fault law. Motorcycles are excluded from the no-fault law. but the law actually recognized that a gap in treatment could mean that your injury is not serious. Now, from a practical matter, on a motorcycle accident case, you don't need to continuously visit a doctor, but you could have a diminished award if you have that gap in treatment. Because if your case is tried, the defense attorney is going to say, he was fine after that last visit. And the only reason why he went back to the doctor 2 years later is for this lawsuit.
Wow. Yeah.
That's what they'll say that every time. A gap in treatment, they will use it against you to minimize your complaints. And your doctor might say, no, there was nothing I could do for me. He was going to have pain forever. But their doctor's going to say, no, he's fine. And the jury is free to think, well, if we don't have complaints for those 2 years, who knows? So a gap in treatment can be used against you from a practical matter and by law on certain cases. And the courts recognize that and judges recognize that. So if you're having problems, you should probably get medical attention for your health. Because according to the law, medical records are admissible to prove your claim. And complaints to your wife aren't documented. When you go to a doctor, he wants to get paid. That's every doctor, because that's his profession. And they have an actual federal law that says they have to keep records in digital form. So those records, the doctor has an obligation to keep them, and the courts recognize that those records are business records. They're an exception to the hearsay rule, and they come in as evidence. So that's what proves your claim. So you had ongoing pain for 2 years? Well, a doctor's records is what proves that, according to the law.
A quick question for you, Mitch. I know sometimes on police reports they'll mention injuries. Is that part of the medical records, or can that be used?
So police reports can be excluded for numerous reasons.
Okay.
And so they don't typically come into evidence. But an admission against interest is an exception to hearsay. And telling the police you weren't injured at the scene of the collision could come into evidence as an admission against interest, because later on you're trying to say you were injured. So if you have problems, you're better off telling the police I'm hurting rather than no, I'm fine, because you want to stay with your bike.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. All right. Well, there you have it, folks. You heard it from the expert himself. Mr. Mitch Proder is not only a rider, but he's, I'm sure if you haven't heard, he's also been through an accident himself, and he's still going strong. So if you can, don't forget that if you need our help, please give us a call 24/7 at 1-800-321-1234, where consultations are free and confidential. Well, that'll do it for now. And thank you all for taking the time to tune in, whether it's on our podcast or video broadcasts. We really do appreciate you taking this time. And please, if you haven't yet, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and of course, YouTube. Like, share, and please, please, please subscribe so you get the latest updates. Now, before we go, Mitch, is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I hope you're well. I hope you ride and have a great weekend and enjoy yourselves and enjoy your time on the road. And if you're riding every day, great. But if you suspect you might have sustained injury, get yourself medical attention.
There you go. That's definitely been a very common theme, and I think that's a very important thing to focus on, everyone. All right. Well, thanks again, Mitch, and for yet another informative session with you. And thank you all for checking us out. And remember, we ride just like you. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Mitch.
Thank you, Mel. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Be well.